Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a fascinating micro case study about a disaster that strikes homes literally every single day, yet plays out almost entirely out of sight. We're going to unpack the hidden timeline and, honestly, the surprisingly rigorous science of water damage recovery, specifically focusing on Woodland, California. So let's look at exactly what happens when the walls around us suddenly spring a leak. Imagine this. You're just relaxing in your living room, right? And suddenly, you hear it. A massive rush of water. So what actually happens in those first 60 minutes after a pipe burst? Well, the clock immediately starts ticking. In the restoration world, water damage isn't just some static puddle. It spreads by the minute. It travels under your floorboards, wicks straight up the drywall, and seeps deep into your insulation. The actions taken within this golden hour can literally mean the difference between a quick, minor cleanup and a catastrophic structural loss. Okay, let's dive into this because the sheer volume of water we're talking about here is staggering. A standard water heater holds about 40 to 80 gallons. To put that into perspective, imagine dumping roughly 2 full bathtubs of water directly into your living room, all at once. When a tank fails, that entire volume just empties out. It spreads across the flooring and into multiple rooms before anyone even realizes what's going on. It is absolute sudden chaos. Now, to understand why this is such a specific, localized threat, we're anchoring our story in Woodland. This area faces a literal perfect storm for property damage. First off, you've got the city's agricultural roots and historic downtown, which means a lot of these homes were built between the 1950s and 1980s. They're full of galvanized plumbing that, frankly, is actively corroding as we speak. Add to that the Sacramento Valley's heavy clay soil. Instead of letting water naturally drain away, this soil acts like a giant bowl, trapping moisture right against the foundation. And finally, throw in those brutal summer heat spikes. We're talking well over 100 degrees. That kind of extreme heat completely stresses the pipes and seals until they just snap. Let's map out the chronological life cycle of this disaster. The stakes here are incredibly high, and crews are operating against a super strict timeline. They literally have just 60 minutes for that initial emergency response to contain the spread. Then, within 24 to 48 hours, they hit the absolutely crucial mold prevention window. You see, in Woodland's warm climate, mold spores wake up fast. Finally, the next 3 to 5 days, those are dedicated entirely to structural drying. That ticking clock brings us right into step 1, emergency mitigation. Now, what's really interesting about this phase is that extraction isn't just about grabbing a mop and a bucket. It's a highly technical, multi-step action plan. Once the active water is finally stopped and truck-mounted pumps suck up the standing pools, crews actually deploy thermal imaging cameras. Why? To find those cold, completely invisible moisture pockets hiding directly behind your plaster. Once they locate them, they bring in commercial air movers to instantly get the air circulating. It's really essential we clear something up right here. The difference between the two main phases of this response, which are mitigation versus restoration. Think of water mitigation as the frantic, all-hands-on-deck effort in the first 48 hours. The whole goal is just to stop the bleeding, stopping the damage from getting worse, extracting the water, and tearing out soaked carpet padding. Water restoration, on the other hand, is the longer, much more deliberate process of completely rebuilding the property back to the exact condition it was in before the disaster even hit. Once that initial emergency is fully contained, we shift gears into step 2, the science of drying. Getting a house dry isn't just about plugging in a few cheap box fans from the hardware store. Not at all. It actually relies on a field called psychrometry. That's the complex science of measuring temperature, humidity, and dew point to calculate exactly how much moisture the air can hold at any given time. Restoration experts use psychrometry like a giant mathematical puzzle. They optimize their commercial dehumidifiers to ensure the air is aggressively pulling moisture out of the physical structure as efficiently and mathematically possible. But here's the catch. Not all water is created equal, and that drastically changes the whole drying approach. We're looking at 3 distinct categories of water. Category 1 is your clean water, straight from the supply lines. Category 2 is gray water, so think of the soapy, dirty water that spills out of a broken washing machine. But Category 3? Oh man, that is grossly contaminated water. We're talking sewage backups or gnarly floodwaters. A Category 3 disaster requires strict OSHA safety protocols, entirely different disposal regulations, and highly specialized hyperfiltration to keep everyone safe. And this brilliantly illustrates that the restoration industry isn't just out there guessing. They operate under a rigorous, standardized scientific playbook known as the IICRC S500.
This is the absolute definitive reference guide for applied structural drying. Literally every single decision a technician makes, from exactly where to place the equipment to what walls need demolition, is governed by these strict protocols. And it's all done to prevent future mold growth and catastrophic structural failure down the line.
So the crucial point here is that they are aiming for exact, hard data targets. Crews are on site every single day, jabbing, penetrating moisture meters into the walls. Wood framing absolutely has to drop below 15% moisture content. Concrete slabs, they need to read below 5% relative humidity. And that gypsum drywall needs to sit perfectly in the 12 to 15% sweet spot. Honestly, they cannot even think about rebuilding until these precise, fully documented levels are hit.
Which brings us to the final phase of this whole disaster life cycle. Step 3, reconstruction and insurance.
Let's see how all this science actually translates into the physical rebuild process. Once that final moisture verification is officially signed off, the real transformation begins. We go from bare, dried-out studs back to a warm, functioning home. The ruined drywall and flooring are replaced, and here's the crazy part. Technicians have to seamlessly match the existing materials. That is no small feat if you're trying to perfectly replicate original 1950s plaster or custom hardwood in historic downtown Woodland. It all culminates in a final walkthrough to ensure the home is exactly, and I mean exactly, as it was.
Now, you might be wondering, why go through all that meticulous, daily scientific data collection during the drying phase? Well, it wasn't just for structural integrity. It is exactly what you need for direct insurance billing to succeed. Insurance companies demand daily moisture readings, thermal photographs, and a highly detailed written scope of the damage. Without this ironclad documentation, your claims can easily be delayed or just flat out denied. And speaking of insurance, here is a massive caveat straight from the source. Homeowners insurance typically covers sudden and accidental water damage. You know, a pipe bursts, water goes everywhere. But gradual damage from poor maintenance, that usually gets denied. Catching a leak instantly isn't just about saving your drywall. It is a massive financial necessity. If a slow leak under your sink quietly rots your subfloor over 6 months, you might be stuck paying the whole bill out of pocket. No way around it. Which leaves us with a pretty critical question to consider about our own homes. Is the aging plumbing hidden behind your walls quietly taking toward its own 60-minute emergency? Water damage is a totally invisible threat right up until the exact moment it isn't. By understanding the science, the timeline, and the risks we've covered today, you're now infinitely more prepared if you ever hear that sudden rush of water. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and hey, stay dry out there.